want to start by saying welcome everyone. I just wanted to, start by saying a huge thank you to everyone who took the time this evening to join us, because how else would you want to spend a Tuesday evening? Allow me to introduce myself and some of the members of our amazing lead team. My name is Deanna Whipp. I work in the Public Affairs Department here at Pittsburgh Water as the coordinator. You may recognize me from some of the other community meetings or events that we've had recently, like if you stopped by Pittsburgh Water's booth during the Bike Pittsburgh event that we had a couple of weeks ago. But I also work closely with our lead team to build our communication strategies and spotlight some of the exciting milestones that our program has made so far. So I'll pass it off to whoever else wants to introduce themselves next.
I'll jump in. My name is Dan Duffy. I'm a consultant to Pittsburgh Water, working on the lead service line replacement program. And I'll pass it to Shannon.
Hi, everybody. My name's Shannon Connell. I'm an associate project manager here at Pittsburgh Water, also working mostly on our lead service line replacement program.
Good evening. My name is Tasha Butler. I am the field liaison that will be meeting with a lot of you lovely people during this process of our lead line replacement program in your area.
Alrighty, so let's jump into it. All right, so for today's meeting, our team, we're just going to be providing an overview about this project, what residents can expect before, during, and after construction. So today's discussion is really just going to include a walkthrough of our project initiation process, including like the agreement packet and coordination meeting, inspection of the existing service lines, installation of the new service lines, and restoration activities. And at the very end of our presentation, we're also going to have a Q&A just to address any lingering questions that folks may have. So for starters, let's talk about our community-led response. So our community-led response was created in 2016 to address the risk of lead service line, address the risk of lead service lines after lead testing showed elevated lead levels in Pittsburgh's drinking water. And while the actual construction process to remove lead service lines is pretty straightforward, we want to develop an equitable and standardized way for our replacement strategy to determine which locations would have their lines replaced first. So we actually pull data from the Allegheny County Census for our factors. And some of these factors include income levels, children under 6, those of childbearing age, blood lead levels, and any line and unknown inventory records that we have for service lines. But in the addition of the removal of lead pipes in our service area, we also implemented a corrosion control method as part of our treatment process in 2019 by adding orthophosphate in the drinking water process. So orthophosphate is just like a food grade additive that adds an additional protective coating to the interior of our pipes as it runs through our distribution system, preventing lead from leaching into our drinking water. And as you can see on our graph to the right, our latest testing period shows the lowest lead levels that we've recorded. These were taken back in October 2025, and it was showing at 2.0 parts per billion, which is much lower than the EPA's baseline action level of 15 parts per billion. So we've made a lot of progress with lowering our lead levels. But in order for us to help finance this huge undertaking, we've been very fortunate to be able to secure state and federal funding to help expedite these system-wide upgrades while significantly reducing the cost for our ratepayers. Which brings us to today. We've invested almost $220 million to replace nearly 16,000, we're almost at 16,000 public lead service lines and over 12,000 private service lines. So this puts us ahead of the curve of having all residential service lines replaced by the end of next year. So the big question as to, probably the reason why you're here is what exactly are we doing? So The work taking place in Bloomfield and central Lawrenceville, it falls under one of our neighborhood lead service line removal projects. For neighborhood LSLR, we'll replace all residential service lines, lead service lines, to protect our community from like the harmful impacts of lead, which includes both the public side and the private side. And this is going to be at no direct cost to our customers. If you look at the graphic to the right, you can see pipe ownership, how it's split up between the publicly owned service line that's connected to the larger water main that runs underneath your street, to the curb box, and then the privately owned service line that runs from the curb box to your interior plumbing. But next question that folks usually have is, how do we select these addresses? So when planning our work areas, we follow the PA Department of Environmental Protection's inventory guidance to determine whether a home has a lead service line or if we don't know the material. So building our inventory includes looking at like historic installation records, physical inspections of like service lines by doing an excavation and examining the pipe material, and even like customer reported data if someone had proactively like removed their service line and gotten it replaced. So if our records indicate that your pipes are either lead, galvanized iron, or unknown, you are like eligible for a replacement. But with that said, not every home on the street will require a replacement. Service lines vary from property to property, so neighbors may receive different notifications based on like available records on each property's like service line material. For attendees who may not have received an agreement packet, I highly recommend checking out our Lead Service Line map. It's an interactive GIS map that we have hosted on our website. You can just go to pgh2o.com/lead map. And you'll be able to plug and chug your address in the search bar. It'll bring you right there. It'll show that if we've completed replacements in your area, if it's planned future work, if we're currently working there. And it'll also identify like what we have on record as to whether your public and private line, what material that may be made of. So diving into the nitty-gritty, we're going to discuss what residents can expect. So from receiving that agreement packet in the mail to having streets milled and paved during like restoration. So the first thing that you probably received was this wonderful packet in the mail. It does include a wealth of information, but our Lead Help Desk, they send out this packet about 45 days in advance to notify addresses that we have identified in the upcoming work area. And this is sent to both the property owner, like, if you live at that address, or, if it's like landlord, and the tenant. So it's a hefty packet that you receive in the mail, but again, it does hold a lot of information about like what is going to be upcoming in your neighborhood, including like a letter from our CEO introducing the program and describing what work that Pittsburgh Water will be completing, an access agreement form, which is very important. We'll dive into that next. That must be signed by the property owner. It must be signed and returned by the property owner. And lastly, some informational materials like a fact sheet outlining like the property owner responsibilities, Pittsburgh Water's responsibilities during construction, infographics that we've seen on like previous slides identifying the service line ownership, general lead FAQ, and lastly, termination risks and what comes with not returning the agreement form, as well as like additional resources for tenants. So understanding the agreement, this is the form that we need from you. While our program does provide us the ability to replace private service lines, it does not give Pittsburgh Water the right to work on private property without the approval of the property owner. So in order for us to replace your private water line, we must have the property owner sign the agreement form to authorize our crew to work on their property. If customers don't consent to this, We are mandated by our regulator, the PUC, to shut service, and customers will need to replace their line at their own expense. But we will jump into that more on the following slides. It's also quite convenient because on the agreement form, we also have a digital option. Sign the QR code and it'll take you straight to DocuSign to get that submitted. But I'll pass it on to Shannon and we can discuss like the differences between like the Pittsburgh Water responsibilities, what we'll be doing, and then what the property owner needs to do.
Right. So as Deanna discussed, under this program, we are replacing both the public and the private portion of the service line. So the public from the water main to the curb stop shutoff valve, which is oftentimes in the sidewalk. And then if there is lead also on the private side from the shutoff valve all the way into the household at the meter, or if the meter's outside in a meter pit, we'll typically replace about 1 foot inside of that outer foundation wall. So this agreement here is the most crucial part to our whole program. We really need all of the customers in our work order area to sign this and get this back to us. So the agreement has a lot of pages like Deanna mentioned, but here specifically is where we talk about what Pittsburgh Water is responsible for, what the property owner is responsible for. So this is essentially stating that, any lead or galvanized iron that we verify, we're going to replace that regardless of what side of the service line that lead or galvanized iron is on. We will backfill any excavation from the curb stop to the property. And if that restoration is in the public right-of-way, which is typically just up to the sidewalk, we will restore that. And then also, if there is a private service line replacement that's needed, we will make the proper interior plumbing modifications, but these are required for us to do according to the Allegheny County Health Department. And then for the owner's responsibilities, we do ask that the property owner provides a safe and accessible working environment for our contractor if we do need access to that private property to either observe the material inside or replace the private service line. If there's any obstructions, we do need these to be removed and allowed access to the water meter and the service line. This is more so if there's, a fully finished basement and there's possibly a wall covering the water meter or the service line where it enters the house. This is something that we would need to have access to in order to complete that work, assuming that there is lead on the private side. All of this is discussed in our coordination meetings that we'll get into. But, we don't want you to make these modifications unless we know that there is lead that we need to replace. So, that's just an example about any obstructions that may be present that we need you to handle prior to us completing the work. If private property is disturbed during the replacement, the property owner is responsible for that restoration. Again, our contractor will, backfill and level out the area that we disturb potentially as part of the work. And then if there's any restoration that's on the property owner, and then whether it's a public only, a private only, or a full public and private replacement, we will send out a sampling kit. This is typically going to come out about 3 to 6 months following the replacement of that lead service line. And we do ask that sampling procedures are followed, that there's a lot of instructions in that kit. So following the replacement, we do ask that you complete sampling to ensure that the lead levels are back to a safe level following the replacement. So as discussed, Pittsburgh Water is regulated by the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, or the PUC. In 2021, the PUC put out a mandate that we're not able to complete a partial replacement. A partial replacement would occur if we were to do any work on the public side of the service line, such as a repair or replacement. And if there was lead on the private service line, we could not connect back to that private lead. That would be considered a partial service line replacement. And we're not allowed to do this as ordered by the PUC. So they mandated that in order for us to avoid a partial service line replacement, we would have to terminate water service on the private side if we do not have that agreement by the property owner in order to complete the work on the public side of the service line if there is lead present. So through a series of notifications, which we'll get a bit more into on the next slide. We are required to follow this termination procedure in the scenario where a property owner declines or is unresponsive to our outreach attempts and does not sign the agreement. We can't just go up and shut off the service line or the water service whenever we feel, we have to follow this termination procedure. We have a series of different communications we need to go through, includes written communications we send in the mail and also postings that we hang at the address. And whenever it comes down to actually shutting service, we will be also knocking on doors, trying to get in contact with customers directly prior to completing that disconnection. So the first of those is a written communication 37 days in advance. We do send this out to every location, regardless of whether or not you send out an agreement or if you send us an agreement back. If you do get that 37-day letter and you did send back your agreement, you can just sit back and wait for us to contact you. Know that we have that agreement. If you're unsure, you can double check with us. You can reach out to our lead help desk either by phone or email to confirm whether or not we've received your agreement. But the reason that we do this is we do have a fair number of people who send us an agreement and then essentially sort of ghost us. So, if that happens and we haven't sent that letter out, our contractors are now not able to do the work that they need to do on the street. It just delays all work, including restoration of, sidewalks and roadways for everybody. Because if they finished up work on all other locations on that street, but then say one customer isn't responsive, then we need to go through this 37-day process. So that delays our work for everyone. And we want to get out of your street as soon as, you want us to get out of there as well. So we're sending out this letter regardless of whether or not we've sent an agreement. Then once the 37-day letter goes out, if you still haven't sent back that agreement to us, a 30-day posting then goes out to the mailing address and also the service address if those are different. Like Tiana mentioned, if it's a landlord and tenant situation, the landlord and the tenant would both get that 30-day posting. So we're required to post the service address with the notice, with the thought that maybe if you're the tenant and that lives there, you might not have gotten that 37-day letter. You don't really know where we're at sending out these letters with this termination process. So this just gives us a chance to have another point of contact to get the service line replaced. So it's really, really important that you get this agreement back to us. Again, if you've returned the agreement and you've received that 37-day letter, you can ignore that notice. If you're submitting your agreement via DocuSign, there's no automatic email or notification confirming that we've received the agreement, so you don't need to worry about looking out for that. Again, if you do want to double check on your agreement status and you're not sure, you can call Lead Help or shoot them an email and we will get back to you on that. Otherwise, the next you'll hear from us is whenever we're reaching out to schedule a coordination appointment with you. So here is where I mentioned there's that longer termination policy. Looking at that arrow diagram, starting all the way on the left is whenever we send out the 45-day packet, which is the agreement letter. And then moving down to the 37-day letter posting, this would be the 37-day letter 37 days in advance of actually shutting and disconnecting water service. Moving down to a 30-day notice. If we still have an unresponsive customer and we verified lead on the private side of the service line, then we move to a 10-day letter. Continuing that process on, we still haven't gotten agreement back, still haven't had a coordination. We do a 3-day posting where we go out and actually hang that 3-day posting on the door. Moving next to our day of termination meeting and shut. At this point, we're going to have the contractor and a field liaison go out. They'll post a day of termination. They're going to knock on the door. They're going to try to get in contact with everybody to try to avoid this shut happening and to allow us to replace that line. If that doesn't occur, then at that point, we will shut the curb stop off. We're not disconnecting yet. The customer at that point does have 5 days to get in contact with us, return that agreement, schedule the coordination, schedule the replacement. After 5 days, if we still have no contact from that customer at that point, our contractor is going in and then physically disconnecting the service line at this point. At this point in the presentation, I do want to point out that since our termination policy was enacted in 2021, we've only terminated water service at vacant properties. So, in a scenario that a customer's water service is terminated and they want to resume the service after we've gone through this termination process, the customer would need to replace the service line at their own expense, submit proof that the lead was replaced before we're able to turn that water back on. Also, just another thing to mention here, we do have a private reimbursement program. It's income-based. Customers can go through that. I will say we do only offer this program to customers who might have replaced their lines prior to our reimbursement program initiating or prior to work occurring. So we're just not offering this service to customers who are in an active construction project like the one that's coming through Upper Lawrenceville and Bloomfield starting later this next month. So project initiation, I've mentioned a couple times the coordination agreement or the coordination appointment. So once you've signed that agreement, like I said, the next time you'll hear from us is when we call you to schedule the coordination appointment. One of our employees is a field liaison, like Tasha Butler, who's on the call with us and right here shown on this slide. They'll come out to the property with the contractor who's completing that work. We're going to meet with you. We'll go into the basement where the service line comes into your property. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to observe that service line material as it comes through your wall. So we're required when we do visual observations to determine that service line material, we need to put eyes on the actual service line in 3 locations. So 2 of them are at the excavation where we dig on either side of the curb stop, typically in the sidewalk, and the 3rd is inside your house. So that's one of the reasons that we're having this coordination appointment. We've had some situations where we've dug up the sidewalk, we found copper on both sides of the curb stop, but then we go in the house and we find lead. So we just want to make sure we got all 3 points of observation and we're not leaving any lead behind. So also at this appointment, the contractor is going to come and look at your property. They're going to look at, your individual specific site. Every house in Pittsburgh is so different. We want to look at your specific house, understand what we have going on in as it relates to replacing the service line. So do you have a finished basement, like I was mentioning earlier? Is there a wall or an obstruction over the meter where the service line enters the house? So in situations like that, we're going to ask you to give us access so we can get to that meter and that service line to do the work that's necessary to complete the job. Also, like I said, we do need to observe the material. So, if it's something like that you could easily move at the coordination appointment for us to observe, great. If not, we would like you to do so and, schedule us to come back again and look at that. So again, we're not going to tell you to do that unless we know that you have lead, because we don't want you to do anything like disturbance until we know that there is actually lead. So also at this appointment, the contractor is going to look at other things like, is there a retaining wall at your house, or are there steps? Is the curb box located in steps leading up to your door? We use a trenchless technology to replace the service line at, about 98% of the locations that we work at. So they're evaluating whether we think that trenchless technology is going to be successful at your property. Most properties where we use that technology at, from the sidewalk to the inside of the house, there's no disturbance along the way. There's no extra holes dug up between those points. So, our goal is to do that at many properties as we can. They'll look at retaining walls, stairs, porches, and see if there's any concerns before the work occurs. For example, we've run into issues where we've seen a retaining wall and it's already halfway leaning down. We need to excavate at the curb stop, that could be at the base of the retaining wall or close by. So, in something like that, it's not our responsibility to, fix that wall. So it's the property owner's responsibility to do what's necessary to allow us to do our work. At this coordination appointment, we'll also look to see if there's any safety concerns. Not saying that there's any, at your specific neighbor or your specific locations in these neighborhoods, but we've just ran into some situations previously where we, either can't move through the basement due to a lot of stuff in there. We can't get personal equipment through to do the replacement. We've had some issues with, the structure itself not being safe. Oftentimes with, vacant buildings, we want to make sure that it's secure. We don't want to install brand new copper in a space that we think that, somebody could come in and steal it a couple days later. So a lot of things that we're going to discuss at these coordination appointments, they're, specific impacts to your specific property. So we will, these are all things that we discuss on a case by case basis. Again, every appointment and every location that we go to is different. So this is really a great chance to look at your specific house. The contractor can bring up any concerns. You can bring up any concerns you have during that work. We can discuss it. And at that appointment, the contractor is typically going to give you an approximate schedule when they'll be back to do the work if there is lead, and we know that we have to come back and replace it. So our typical process there is that the contractor is going to go down the street. We are hoping that they'll be able to do all the verifications, as many as they can in advance of doing some replacements so they understand how many service lines need to be replaced on a given block or a given street. And then at that point, they'll start contacting property owners to schedule those replacements. We hope to have as many coordination meetings as scheduled as we can before the contractor starts digging. This doesn't always happen, but as we get further into it, we try to get out in advance of the contractor. So we have these coordination meetings, and that allows us to do is if they do dig and find lead, then the contractor can immediately call to schedule that replacement. They can't do the replacement if we don't have the agreement in the coordination appointment. So I think the theme of this meeting is really to just hammer in on getting that agreement returned to us and scheduling coordination appointments when lead help is reaching out. All right, so inspecting the service lines. Like I was saying, the contractor will go to the properties within the work order area, and they need to verify the material of the service line. Something that we don't know prior to the contract starting is where the lead is at. Unfortunately, the records that have been kept weren't so great. Up until the 80s, the city didn't own any portion of the water service line. So if there's any work being done on that service line, it wasn't recorded because at that point it was entirely private. So the first part of this project is, going to the curb stop, digging it up, and verifying what the materials are. So I mentioned that, per the DEP requirements that we follow, we're looking for 3 points of verification. So whenever we dig down to the curb stop, we're looking 24 inches on either side of that curb stop. So on the public side and on the private side, that would be 2 points of verification. And again, inside your house would be that third point. So following the service line verification, you will receive a door hanger that tells you the results of the service line material. Our construction inspectors will leave that for you so you can know what is found after the contractor completes that work. Again, typically, we only disturb one sidewalk pad to complete this work. Oftentimes, the water main is in the street, and so the curb stop is in the sidewalk. The exception being that sometimes the water main is in the sidewalk area, so the curb stop would be in a lawn area, or perhaps in Bloomfield and Upper Lawrenceville, we run into some alleyways where there isn't necessarily a sidewalk or a smaller segment of sidewalk, so the curb stop could be in the street. So again, very site specific. It really depends on an individual street where that's located, but more often than not, we're digging up a sidewalk to verify the curb stop materials. So installing the new service line, as lead is verified, our crews will replace those lead pipes, whether on the public, private, or both, and they use a trenchless excavation method to do so. Over 90% of the locations that we work at, we are able to complete this replacement using a less disruptive trenchless technology. There's a little video here that shows it. So this shows the copper being pulled through right in place of the existing lead service line. So this is it's being pulled through the street to the water main. So you can see that in this video. There's really just an excavation dug at the water main if you need to replace the public side. the excavation done in the sidewalk, and sometimes that's all we need to do to replace the entire service line. So if we do need to replace lead on the private side of the service line, we have to get a permit with the Allegheny County Health Department and their plumbing division to do that work on the private side. It does require a licensed plumber to do the work. ACHD requires us to evaluate the plumbing inside the house, and the biggest part that we're looking for during this evaluation is if there's a backflow preventer present on the property. So the backflow preventer, it prevents the household water flowing from your house back into the public water system. So if you have some type of cross connection to a part of your sewer system, it's just not allowing water to go back into our public water system. So as part of installing that backflow preventer, we also have to make sure that there's an expansion tank present. With your hot water heater, water expands when it heats. So if you've got a backflow preventer without an expansion tank and the water expands, it could cause damage to your plumbing. So we need to put this expansion tank in along with the backflow preventer. And then we also put in a pressure regulating valve. It does, pretty much exactly that. It regulates the pressure. So if the water pressure is too high from the water main, it can harm household plumbing again. So it allows us to regulate that water pressure and reduce it if needed. We install 1-inch copper pipe. So if you have a lead service line, more often than not, we found that inner diameter is smaller. It's about a 5/8-inch diameter pipe. So if nothing else, when we replace that lead line, we're oftentimes improving water flow through the installation of the new 1-inch copper service line. So this is just another reason that we put in that pressure regulator valve. So we're making sure we're not increasing the pressure too much during the replacement of that service line. So again, to the best of our ability and our contractor's ability, we do try to move down the street, do all of the work on the street, and then follow up with restoration. This contract we'll get into schedule a bit later, but we're looking to start work in September. So we're going to try to do as much restoration as we can prior to DOME's winter moratorium going into place, which is November 1st. They don't let us complete final restoration when temperatures drop too much. So I would say the majority of the restoration for this contract will be completed in the springtime. We will still complete service line verifications and replacements during the winter months. So to the degree that we can get the streets done this fall before the moratorium goes into place, we will be looking to start restoration. We can't pave a street until all the work is done on that street. So sometimes our best public outreach is our neighbors. If you have any neighbors that you're talking to during our project, ask them if they got their agreement in and had the coordination and scheduled the replacement. So, as soon as we can do that, we can get all the restoration done. So some of the photos here, we see the post-construction. This is following the verification and or replacement. We backfill to grade, and the sidewalk we're backfilling with stone to grade, and then in the street we're laying an asphalt binder or cold patch as a temporary restoration until we can come through and replace the entire street. So the sidewalk restoration, as you can see in this photo in the middle, it's a brick sidewalk. We put the brick back. If it's a concrete sidewalk, we'll pour the concrete. We restore to what the existing conditions were. And then, like I said, when all of the work is done on that street, we're able to get in and pave, and a final road restoration is shown here on the right. So again, we want to get in and out of these neighborhoods as quickly as we can. So sometimes customer responsiveness can hold up our ability to restore things after the service line work is complete. So that's a quick overview of our restoration process. So private property restoration, it's not in the nature of our program. It's not how EPA or Penvest, where we get our funding from for these projects, allows us to spend our dollars. They give us funding to use for specific purposes, which is to replace the lead service lines, and they limit us to where we can use it, such as private property. So as part of this program, we do not cover private restoration. Inside the house, like I mentioned before, we need access to the water meter and the service line. So, if drywall needs to come down, for example, if drywall is blocking the meter and the service line, we would ask that you would do that and then put that back if you wish. Outside of the house, if the area between the curb box and the foundation is disturbed, again, our contractor is going to backfill and level that area, but the property owner is responsible for the restoration. I do want to point out that our contractor does everything in their ability not to disturb private property. Again, over 98% of our locations that we work at, the service line replacements are done using trenchless technology. So we do intend on minimizing the impact as much as possible, but everything doesn't always go according to plan and during construction. So it's really important that you're scheduling these meetings so we can discuss the replacement methods with you. The contractor can, discuss in advance of what they think they need to achieve, how they need to achieve that replacement given site constraints, and what would and would not be restored if disturbed. All of that, again, is discussed in the coordination. It's very site specific. It's tough to talk about every individual location. So that's your chance to do so. One stipulation is if the contractor does damage something on private property, as part of that work, we have construction inspectors on site with our contractors. They're taking pictures throughout the entire process. They take pictures before the work occurs, before we do any digging. They take photos during the work occurring, and they take photos after the work is complete. So I also encourage you to take photos of your own for your own peace of mind before this work occurs. It's something I do at my own house whenever I know that work's going to be occurring in my area. I'm trying to document what those existing conditions are. And, sometimes the existing conditions show damage. It's not always in a perfect place. So, the contractor's not going to restore or repair pre-existing damages, but if damages do occur during their work, we will send the contractor out to evaluate and address those. The phasing. Here we see is Lawrenceville on the left, Bloomfield on the right. These neighborhoods, if you're not familiar, are right next to one another, Lawrenceville on top of Bloomfield. So we have phased out these neighborhoods in the order which the contractor will complete the work. So to avoid other Pittsburgh Water projects that we have ongoing in the area, and also if we are aware of work that other utilities are doing in the area, we look to phase it this way so we can avoid overall congestion and the overall impact to the neighborhood at a given time. So over in Bloomfield, phase 1, the contractor will begin in September of this year. They will move to Lawrenceville, phase 2, also shown in blue. After that work's complete, they'll head back over to Bloomfield phase 3 in orange, followed by Bloomfield phase 4 in green, and they'll wrap up with Lawrenceville 5 and 6 in that order. So a bit of jumping around, but this is mostly due to, ongoing work that we're aware of. So we're trying to just avoid the overall impact to our customers. So, like I said, our contractor does plan on starting this work September 2026. Each of those phases that I showed you, there's 6 for the entire work order or for the entire project area. At this point in time, each phase is expected to take about 2 months. That being said, the schedule could be subject to change. Depending on how much lead we find on a given street, it might take us longer to get through a work order to verify and replace everything. Customer responsiveness can impact how quickly we're able to get in and out of a phase. And then also if we, aren't finding as much lead as we were thinking, then we don't need to coordinate with customers. We don't need to replace that lead. So we might be able to get out of certain areas quicker than others. So again, it's quite subject to change. Again, weather has an impact on that. So right now we're expecting each phase to take about 2 months to complete. The substantial completion of this project will be the end of 2027. Our typical construction contracts are a year, with final completion occurring 30 days after substantial completion. And again, like I said, DOME's winter moratorium does occur. It begins November 1st and it ends March 31st. So final restoration could be delayed by that. They don't let us complete final restoration when the temperatures are too low. That being said, if we do have a mild winter, maybe some warmer weather conditions, the DOME inspector for a given area will, monitor that and allow us to complete restoration. Again, very, very temperature dependent though. So our daily impacts, our typical permit hours through the city of Pittsburgh is Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Sometimes on busier streets, DOMI does limit our work hours. It could be from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. instead. These will be on the no parking signs. The dates on the no parking signs are the dates that match our permit. Sometimes it's longer than the actual amount of time it will take us to complete that work, but these are permits that we get through DOMI, so the work hours and the dates will be on those no parking signs. Crews will close streets where the service lines are being verified or replaced as needed. That being said, they do accommodate local traffic. I know sometimes if you're driving down a street and you see a road closed sign, you know, your instinct is to not drive down that street because the road's closed. But, you know, if this is where you live and contractors aren't directly in front of your house, you know, feel free to wave down a flag or let them know the situation. Let them know where you need to get. They're as accommodating as they can be, while also ensuring that the site is kept safe. They don't want anybody, you know, going into one of the excavations. So, and even if you're on a street that is closed, again, just flag down one of our flaggers or the contractors. Let them know where you need to go. They can accommodate you getting in and out of the streets in the neighborhood. And then again, these no parking signs will go up. These do need to be placed at least 48 hours before enforcement. So sometimes the contractors will put up these signs on a Sunday and they'll start work on Monday. They're going to do as much work as they can without towing anybody, without asking anybody to move their car, but no towing can occur until 48 hours have passed since they put up those signs. So please be mindful of where those are at. A good practice that we ask customers to do is, you know, put a note on your windshield or somewhere that the contractor can see, you know, whether it's your house number on that street or your phone number. They can give you a call. They do everything in their ability to ask people to move their calls or their cars prior to towing. So please just keep that in mind. Be aware of the no parking signs and be paying attention if these contractors are trying to get in touch with you to move their car. So some final construction considerations that I have for you. During the replacement, the homeowner or the homeowner's designated representative must be present during that replacement. We don't want to replace the private lead service line if you're not home. Any areas that we do disturb, we backfill as part of that service line work. Sometimes our curb boxes might be in a yard. You know, we do have the right to access our infrastructure as it is public property. So, you know, sometimes depending on the location of the curb box can raise some questions with the homeowners, but we do need to be able to access that to verify the service line materials. And then, you know, stairs, retaining walls, certain decorative landscapes like bushes or flowers could be disrupted during that work. So again, I really just want to harp that, you know, these impacts should be discussed during the coordination meeting. Be sure to have these before when we're calling, so we can try to have them before any work is occurring, before any digging occurs, so we can get ahead of these things before it happens. So I will kick this one back to Deanna.
Thank you, Shannon. Yeah, just want to include some additional project resources for everyone. Our website's a great place to start. Just going to pgh20.com/lead. You can see our wonderful community lead response page right here to the right. As well as other construction updates, you can go to pgh20.com/construction. It'll show where lead service line replacement projects are taking place, as well as like any other Pittsburgh Water related construction, like for sewers or small diameter water main replacements and so on. You can also follow the link, catch us on social media. We try to post our updates for any big construction projects coming up, or maybe you saw this community meeting getting published on one of our social media platforms. And most importantly, some contacts. Our wonderful Lead Help desk, you can always contact them at leadhelp@pgh20.com, or you can call the Lead Help desk with the phone number below. And of course, myself included, please feel free to email me with any questions. And speaking of questions, I did see some questions get added to the chat. So let's start off with, will you send us a recording of this call and the slide deck being shown? Yes. We are recording this presentation. We're planning on uploading it to YouTube and onto our lead page. So folks who missed out on the community meeting or want to review the slides, they're able to review it that way. Next question is, do you need to be present at your home for this work or any portion of it?
Yeah, so when we complete the service line verification, you don't need to be home for that. You know, again, like I said, it's typically in the sidewalk where our crews are able to go ahead and verify those materials without you being home. If we need to replace the public side of the service line only, meaning there's no lead on the private side, you don't need to be home for that. We can replace the public lead without you being home. The only time you need to be home is for the coordination appointment that we have prior to work starting, and then also for the private lead service line replacement. If we verify lead at your house, then you would need to be home for that.
Shannon, one point of clarification. There is also the county requires us to get our contractor's work inspected. So if our contractor can schedule that the same day of the replacement, they'll do so. But quite often, we need to schedule another time for the county to come in and take a look at the work that we've done to make sure it passes their standards.
Right. And, you know, in some recent projects, we're finding that the county is only willing to schedule a couple of these a day. And we have contractors in all neighborhoods of the city doing these replacements. So sometimes we're not able to get them all the same day that we do the replacement.
And also, if you don't mind me jumping in as well, they can also have their rep present as long as they are listed on that documentation, which is the agreement. The rep can be there for any time that the owner is not available to be there as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good transition into our next question, which is, I'm a renter. What notice do landlords need to provide those of us living in properties that are impacted? How will renters receive information?
So I'll jump in on this one. All of the information packet that Deanna and Shannon described and all of our communication materials go to both the service address and the property owner. So if you're a tenant, keep an eye on your mail. You should be getting that packet in the mail if you're part of the work area.
Yeah, and also after we complete the verification, like I mentioned, our inspectors do hang a door hanger right on the doorknob if they're able to, or somewhere else close to the front door with the verification materials. So if there is lead, they'll write that down clearly that there's lead on either the public or the private. So you'll know following the verification what those materials are, and you can expect a replacement if there's lead. If there's not lead, then they'll just backfill the sidewalk or wherever the curb stop is, and no other work will occur.
Another question that we have is, how far in advance am I going to be notified of the date of the inspection appointment and the date of the replacement date? Also, will you give me an estimate on how many days the replacement at my house would take, meaning the duration you'll need access inside of my home?
So the coordination appointment, you'll get a phone call from our lead help desk, and they will schedule that time with you. They'll have available slots and dates, and try to find a time that's convenient for you for that appointment. Once we have that appointment, and we introduce you to our contractor working in this area, they will pass on their information and get your contact information from you, and they will schedule the private side replacement with you directly. We schedule the first appointment, and then the contractor will do the follow-up. Most of our replacements take from half a day to a full day. Quite often, our contractors can do two locations in one day, so they might schedule one first thing in the morning and the second one at noontime. But depending on the complexity and the length of the private side, um, it might take a full day for the work to occur. But again, that's something that they can generally give you a better understanding of during that coordination time. If they look at your site and think that it's going to be a difficult replacement, they can let you know and clearly ask that question when they come out. If they don't offer that information to you, ask the contractor that when they're at your house.
Also, if you don't mind me stepping into, Dan, also keep in mind when we are scheduling these coordination appointments, they are scheduled Monday through Friday, starting at 7:30 till 2 p.m. We give a half an hour window for these appointments. So it's not something where we're asking you to stay the whole day, like maybe the cable company or something. So we try to be respectful of your time to get these coordinations done and take the time to answer any questions that you may have.
And I am seeing quite a few questions regarding like scheduling. So I'm just going to pop back to our phases map. Um, Broader question being like, has a schedule for Lawrenceville residents been established?
Yeah, I see some others here if you want me to jump into a couple of these, Deanna. So as far as, when we might be working in phase 5 or phase 6, we'll have better information as the project proceeds. I would anticipate that would probably be late spring of 2027. As Shannon indicated, this project is starting in September. We're anticipating it to take about a year. So those last couple of phases will probably be late spring of next year when that starts. So we generally will start the coordinations 30 to 60 days prior to the contractor going into each of these phases. So, we'll get in touch with you, uh, like I say, a month to 2 months before we start the work in that neighborhood. I think Shannon indicated we try to get as many of the coordination appointments done before the contractor actually starts digging, so that process doesn't hold up their progress. And if your phone numbers change, contact person changes, please reach out to Lead Help and let them know. If there's a new owner of the property, we'd ask that we get that new property owner's signature on the agreement. But certainly if your phone numbers change, it is important to let us know. Shannon referenced before that we have locations where we get an agreement and, next thing we know, we can't contact the customer because their phone numbers change. So it is critical that you communicate that to us. And our Lead Help folks are, they'll get right into your customer account information and update that. So everybody on the project that needs it will have it. I do believe that our Lead Help folks, when they call you, and Tasha, maybe you can answer this one, that it'll be identified as coming from Pittsburgh Water.
Correct.
Uh,
It'll come from a Pittsburgh Water caller ID on the phone, and the phone number will pop up. It's normally a 412-255-2423 number that will show up on your phone if anyone wants to take note of that. But it does come from a Pittsburgh Water contact number.
yeah, and the contractor, when they're meeting with you, they will provide you their phone number. And, we do ask, it's probably a good idea to put that in your contacts in your phone so that when you get a call, I know we have situations where the contractor tries to contact the customer, a month after that coordination meeting and is unsuccessful. And I don't answer phones if I don't recognize the phone number myself. So We then will oftentimes have lead help reach out and try to transfer the call directly to the customer. But if you can take down the contractor's number, put it in your contacts with their name, so you know who it is that's calling you when the scheduling, when they call you to schedule. Um, During the work, the water will be shut off to your house while we're replacing your service line. We're generally not shutting off the water to a particular street just because we're working on that street. That being said, there are situations where we might have an issue with our water main and we have to shut down a section of that water main to make a repair while we're doing this work. So on a day-to-day basis, just because we're working on the street, that shouldn't impact your water service unless we're working at your specific address. Um, the map on the website be more street specific. I'm, I think what you're suggesting is on the website, we show, for example, Bloomfield as one neighborhood. We'll look to see if we can put the phases on the website. Presently, it is just shown as one neighborhood, and understand, folks wanting a better idea of when the work will happen. So we'll take that back and see if our GIS folks can help us out with that. Um, so there's a question about someone in Stanton Heights, and that's actually a project that is happening under a different contract that's happening before this work. Um, I didn't think, and Shannon, I don't know if you know, I didn't think we would have posted any no parking over there associated with the LSLR project.
Yeah, I don't believe we're getting into Stanton Heights until the end of October, maybe beginning of November. So if there's any no parking signs up right now, and if they say PWSA, there's a chance that it's a different contract here in Pittsburgh Water. It could be our operations department completing work, but it wouldn't be
It,
about.
We've
it
got
is.
the address Simona Ave, so we can look into that. And
It is other work, just FYI, Dan. I do know that they have been having some, they were checking some curb boxes and things of that nature. So I think ops has been up and through Stan Heights a few times. So those can possibly be because of that, just FYI.
Okay. And if you ever have a question about the lead work, please give our lead help number a call. The folks that work on our lead help desk. If it's not a lead project, they may not be able to have the answers for you, but if it's associated with our lead project, they'll be able to help you out. And I also see there, uh, the issue of the shut-off notice, and as Shannon explained, we do send the 37-day shut-off notice um, to all locations, regardless of whether you sent an agreement in or not. And what we found is, I think she went through this. I'll go through it real quick. We have people that send in an agreement and then are completely unresponsive. And if we haven't sent that 37-day notice and that person remains unresponsive, we have to start that process. Oftentimes when the contractor is trying to, pave the street, we don't want to pave the street if we've got to dig more holes in it. So um, we do send those 37-day notices to everyone. It says right on the top, if you've already returned your agreement, please ignore this notice. So that is on the letter and is part of the communication associated with that 37-day notice. Um, I don't know if there's any other, if I'm seeing all the questions here.
So we got a couple other questions. One of them being for the interactive map that we showed earlier, where type in your address shows like what your material is on the private and the public side. And for this person, it says that their private side material is non-lead. So does that mean this is the final conclusion and no inspection is needed for their home?
If you received a packet, that's likely because we need to investigate what the public side material is. And we do ask people to return their agreement. Our records show that your private side is not lead, but in the event that we excavate at the curb and we find something different, we have that agreement. We can get in direct contact with you and coordinate the replacement of your private side. If that's what the map says and you don't want to schedule a coordination appointment, just let help know that when they call you. Say, I'd like to wait until the private side is verified at the curb, and they will do that. But we do ask people to send those agreements, so when we dig, if we do find something that we're not expecting, we can react quickly and get the replacement done.
Another question that we received is, we were previously subject to tap water testing for lead by Pittsburgh Water, and the result was below detection limits. Will our service lines be replaced?
What was the last part of that, Deanna?
If their service lines would still be replaced, even if their lead levels are showing low.
Yes, and as you may know, I think Deanna mentioned it as part of her part of the presentation. We started the use of orthophosphate back in 2019 to protect our drinking water from the corrosive effects of the lead pipes, from lead being corroded and entering into the water. But really, the only solution for making sure that lead is not present in the drinking water is to replace the service line. So we need to remove the source of that lead. We've got a system in place to protect our customers until we have the opportunity to remove that. But we still need to remove it. The second part of that is there's a new federal legislation that's taking effect next October, that will mandate that we remove all lead from our system. So we're coupling the public health aspects that we've been targeting for the past 8 years, along with the upcoming federal requirements that we're going to be mandated to do this going forward.
Another quick question about the maps that we have up here. Is the orange area in Bloomfield Phase 3? Yes. Yes, Phase 3 is going to be up here. And then last question we have on our radar is, our street has chronically low water pressure, and lately we've been losing all water access without warning. Is there any possibility that replacing the service lines will improve pressure to the properties?
If the area has low pressure, probably not. On an individual house basis, if you've got a lead service line, it's very likely that that service line is 5/8 inch in diameter. That's what the majority of what we encounter is. And all of the new service lines that we're putting in are 1 inch in diameter. So if the pressure is sufficient at the main and the issues between the main and your house because of the size of your service line, this will definitely improve it. If the situation is associated with the main itself, then it's likely that this won't result in an improvement.
All right. Any more questions from our attendees? Feel free to drop them in.
Maybe go back to that contacts page, Deanna. Resources, yeah. In case people want to jot that information down.
Jot it down, visit our website.
All right.
All right. Well, not seeing any more questions coming in. Would like to thank everyone for spending time with us this evening and for attending. Please visit our website, contact our lead help desk if you have any questions. Our team is more than happy to address any questions or concerns you may have about our upcoming projects. Great. Thanks, everyone.